voice of Reichman University.
Welcome to this special episode hosted by Audioversity. My name is Jonah Hoffman, and joining us today to discuss combating anti-Semitism online following the horrific attack on Israel on October 7th, Professor Moran Yarchi, head of the Public Diplomacy Program and head of the Digital Influence and Perception specialization here at the School of Communications at Reichman University. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here with you.
Alrighty, so let's just dive right into this. First up, I think important question to ask, because I know you're very involved with Actel. How did you get involved with them in the first place?
Actel is an organization that was established here at Reichman University following the 2014 round of the conflict, in which our students, many of the international students as well, were volunteering to be active online for Israel. They operated wonderful web pages, mostly on Facebook, called Israel Under Fire. And they had an amazing reach of 40 million unique users. And following this amazing experience, we decided to open an academic program, the Public Diplomacy Program, which is an honor program here at Reichman University. And all of our students are actually interns in Actel, so they learn the theory behind public diplomacy and public diplomacy during conflict, because that is the main challenge for the state of Israel. And they get a lot of practical tools, and in Actel they get practical experience. So on a day-to-day basis, without an active round of the conflict, Actel deals mostly with anti-Semitism, with BDS, with anti-Israeli sentiment online. And whenever, unfortunately, the conflict rises and poses a challenge for us as Israelis, Actel turns into a situation room in which all of our volunteers and students are working towards presenting the case for Israel in online platforms.
Right, that's actually amazing, and I think I actually am in the WhatsApp groups for one of those situation rooms currently operating, and it's amazing to see the work everybody has been doing. So one of the big things that happens every single time that Israel ends up in a conflict, whether it was this year or 2 years ago or 4 years ago, no matter how long ago it was, anti-Semitism on college campuses and throughout the globe arises. So when it comes specifically to college campus and colleges in general, especially in the United States, how does Actel combat anti-Semitism there?
Yeah, so as I said, on a day-to-day basis, Actel is very involved in anti-Semitic messages online and trying to combat them. And now we're also working with specific colleges. We're actually working on expanding that, because we know it is a real challenge for Jewish communities, for Jewish students. So part of what we do, we have different sorts of missions, and I will tell you a little bit about it in a couple of minutes. But one of our goals is to find anti-Semitic messages online and to make sure our community report about those messages so they would be deleted. So the structure of Actel is that we have the situation room here on campus, and some of our students also work from home, because many of them are not in Israel right now. So that's the main core of the people that are active and creating different missions, whether it's content creation, whether it's research missions, whether it's finding different messages to report on, anti-Semitic, inciting, misinformation or disinformation, creating online activism missions, and we'll also touch upon that in a few minutes. So those are the students that are working with us here. But other than those students, we have a massive community of over 40,000 people that is active on Actel. Those are activists. And they are working on different platforms. As you mentioned, we have WhatsApp groups, but we also have Facebook communities. We have people that are working with us on TikTok, on Facebook, on X, and on Instagram. Those are our main platforms. And those activists actually go and resonate the messages of Actel. So in many cases, we don't ask them to like our message or to share our message. We ask them to download it and share it organically on their pages, so the distribution would be much greater. Now, going back to campuses, so we are working with students from all over the world. We also have a European section that is very active these days. But we also try to provide those Jewish students, or pro-Israeli students, with the right training so they would know how to combat those messages online, and also to try and empower them and make them more resilient.
Yeah, I think it's definitely very important, especially with the current state of college campuses, with all the groups that you're seeing form, and every single one is shouting from the river to the sea, and every other anti-Semitic message you can think of.
It's a real challenge because many of those people are just ignorant about the situation. I've been I was on a sabbatical a few years ago in a very liberal university in the West Coast, and I had a conversation with a few of my students, and I think some of it comes from the fact that they don't know the facts and they don't even understand the message from the river to the sea. Because when you provide them with a map and you show them that if they're actually rooting for a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, it means that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. And when you point that out, they say, no, that's not what we meant. We meant two-state solution. So then you need to tell them, okay, so rally for two-state solution. Don't rally for a Palestinian state from the river to the sea. That's a different situation.
Yeah, and when you mentioned showing the map, I've seen a lot of videos of people currently talking about the fact that when you bring them the map, they can't point to what river and to what sea they're actually referring to.
Yeah.
So sort of going off of that, a lot of influencers, a lot of big influencers that you're seeing like Bella Hadid and others like that are sharing these pro-Hamas and anti-Israel posts online. How do you combat these big influencers who have millions upon millions of followers?
That's a challenge, and social media creates a lot of challenges like fake news. AI now adds new challenges as well because you see pictures and you can't really know if they're fake, was created using AI or not, and yet we know that their influence is very massive because when we see something with our own senses, the cognitive impact on us as viewers, because we sense that, is much wider. But I think that Israel also have influencers that are very active and effective, and we are trying to use them. But when we're looking at social media, and that's a number game, and sadly we can't overcome the number of people that are supporters of the Palestinian side. But I think that we need to make a very clear distinction. Israel is not fighting Palestine. Israel is not fighting the Palestinian people. Israel is fighting a terror organization that had conducted horrific atrocities against human beings, babies, children, women, elderly people. We see that they're holding babies hostage as we speak right now. And that is exactly the message Israel needs to resonate to the international community. And that is the type of work we've been doing in Actel. So if the beginning, very similar to other organizations that are trying to make the case for Israel, we were showing some pictures, not the horrific ones, but trying to communicate our grievances. After a few days, we changed the strategy and we shifted to a strategy of identification. We called the "What Would You Do" strategy. And when you let people from different places around the world imagine themselves in your shoes for a minute, what would you do if it was your baby being held hostage by a terror organization for over a month? What would you do if it was your grandma? What would you do, or would you have done if you were in a music festival and people were shooting at you? Where would you run? If you can make those people identify with you, mostly on the basis that we are a liberal democracy with shared values to the Western world, then people can try and imagine themselves in your shoes and be more open to hear your arguments. And I think that is part of what we're trying to do, and I hope that we are successful to some extent.
Right. So you mentioned using the footage and using the images that have come out from the atrocious attack on October 7th. How, since then, you mentioned that you've sort of taken a step back from using them as much now, and you're focusing more on the sort of personalization of it. Are you still using them to an extent to sort of convey a message, or to try and still make it so it's that human beings, and trying to convey that message to the Western liberal democracies that this could happen to you also? Are you trying to mix those two messages?
I think we're trying to work on a variety of messages and to create a strategy that would be effective. I think that those horrific picture, and we have the long video that the IDF spokesperson has been exposing different influencers, journalists, diplomats, and other influencers too. But again, they too don't broadcast it to the whole world. I think that is a very effective strategy, because I think that the average person cannot deal with 47 minutes of atrocities and horrific pictures. And same with shorter videos. I think that people could watch one, maybe two. Later on, they wouldn't even open it, and then the impact will dissolve. But showing it to journalists, for instance, which are influencers, which can share their feelings, it will impact the way that they cover the conflict, is very influential. Or showing it to decision makers is very influential. So I truly appreciate the efforts that the IDF spokesperson has done in that sense. But I think that civic diplomacy, and there are a lot of horrific videos out there. People that want to see those will be able to find them. Although Hamas, that had published many of them in the beginning, is trying to delete many of them now because they claim that that wasn't the attack they had conducted. But I think that for Actel, that's not the right strategy. Mostly because we're working with a very broad online community that is resonating our message, and we also have responsibility towards our community and our viewers. So I think that showing some pictures but not the real horrific one is the right strategy for it.
So going off of all these strategies, you have all these different strategies, whether it's personalization of the incident, whether it's the images and showing them. How do you ensure that this content that you're producing reaches as many people across the globe as possible, whether it's in Japan or the United States or India or Great Britain? How do you make sure it reaches all of these different people?
Yeah, so we're working on various platforms, as I mentioned. The most effective one these days is TikTok. Although we should mention that TikTok as a platform is pushing forward pro-Palestinian messages, and that needs to be said. But we are also able to push forward our narrative on TikTok, but using our communities on various channels and using their help in making the message being heard on various platforms to different targets in an organic way. We don't use any automation at all. I think that's what makes our message stronger, and also it reaches broader audiences. We know that we have millions of views to the content we are creating. We spoke a little bit about strategy. So part of what we're trying to do is create legitimacy for Israel and its actions. So on one hand, we are trying to promote Israel's legitimacy by showing our victimization, by showing our resilience. On other side, by showing Israel's morality. But at the same time, we're also emphasizing the delegitimization of Hamas. And with messages like their propaganda or, I don't know, psychological warfare these days, and comparing them to ISIS, for instance, and showing mostly, that is the most effective one, showing how Hamas actually hurts Palestinians, and using the very popular hashtag of Free Gaza, but turning it to Free Gaza from Hamas, is a way to resonate this message.
Right. So one last thing before we go, how can people sort of start to get involved in Actel and start to help spread these messages online?
Okay, that's a great question. So you can join our community. We are working on various platforms, and if you'll type act-il on Instagram, on TikTok, also in a Facebook group, in Twitter or X these days, that's a good way of communicating with us and joining our community and being able to resonate our message. As I mentioned before, we opened a European operation a couple of weeks ago, and it's very active. What we're doing there is that we've opened desks in various languages dealing with specific communities. So we have a UK desk, so you can search it Actel UK, or a German desk, Spanish desk, Italian desk, French desk. And what I like about those specific missions is that other than broadcasting or promoting the general messages that we are working with, we are working on targeting specific audience and working with the Jewish communities of those societies. And the fact that we're working with specific audiences, it means that we can actually talk to them while taking their cultural context into account. So in the UK, we had a very intense and effective video comparing between Madeleine, the British girl that was kidnapped 16 years ago in Portugal, if I'm not mistaken, and comparing her to the Israeli children that are being held hostage. So when you speak to people, not just in their language, but also in their culture, in things that they can identify with, your message is much more effective. And we see that in many cases, we have influencers, back to your previous questions, that are taking our content and sharing it, or even mashing it into their own videos, and it's widening our reach, and it's very effective. So I really want to urge everybody that is listening now to join us and join our community and try to help us make the case for Israel on online messages or platforms.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for joining. Professor Moran Yarchi, head of the Public Diplomacy Program and head of the Digital Influence and Perception Specialization here at Reichman University. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me and hoping for a quiet day.
Definitely hoping for a quiet day. Thank you to everybody for listening to this special episode of Audioversity, the voice of Reichman University.